Now, if you're an OG Yankee fan, or just a young diehard like myself, you already know what the 70s was like in the Bronx. But for those who don't, outside of a little graffiti, it was nothing like you see today. The subway felt a little colder, the streets a little more gritty, and around the way, Yankee Stadium was in the middle of what we have been referring to as of late, a blow up. The Yankees were playing all their home games at Shea Stadium, once again living like tenants in their rival's house. As for the team itself, they were a shadow of their former glory. The Mano era was a fading memory, and the Horace Clarke years had left a bitter taste in the mouths of fans who had grown up on a diet of championships. The Yankees essentially were a corporation that had forgotten how to turn a profit on the field. But then on New Year's Eve, 1974, the baseball world came to a standstill. While the rest of New York was preparing to watch the ball drop in Times Square, George Steinbrenner was preparing to drop a bomb on not just Major League Baseball, but the entire sports world. It wasn't a trade. It wasn't a draft pick. We'll call it a heist. A legal, calculated, $3.75 million heist that didn't involve a single mask or a getaway car. It did involve a North Carolina farm boy, a stingy owner in Oakland, and a $50,000 technicality that would add yet another
Get the fuck out of here!
moment in Yankees history. With that said, Bruce Rivers won't be necessary for this one. Just the right bait. Welcome to the gallery. Before he was a Yankee legend, he was just plain old Jim Hunter from Hertford, North Carolina. If you saw him walking down the street, the last thing you would think is $1 Million Ace. You'd probably think outdoorsman. He was built like a sturdy oak tree, not overly tall but solid, with a calm that could make a hurricane feel like a light breeze. Jim grew up as the youngest of 8 children. Life on the farm wasn't about fame. It was about the work. It was about the repetitive, grueling tasks that build a different kind of strength. The kind of strength that doesn't necessarily show up in a weight room, but does show up in the 9th inning of a tie game. Now, Hunter almost never made it to the big leagues at all. During a Thanksgiving hunting trip in high school, a shotgun misfired. Jim took pellets to his right foot, a lot of them. Most scouts saw a kid that might never run again. They saw a liability. But Clyde Klutz, a scout for the Kansas City Athletics, saw something else. He saw a kid who didn't complain. He saw a kid who just wanted to get back on the mound. Charlie Finley, the flamboyant and often erratic owner of the Athletics, signed him for $50,000. He didn't just sign a pitcher, he signed a project. Finley, ever the promoter, decided Jim wasn't a marketable name. He heard the kid liked to fish, so he invented a story about him coming home with a string of catfish. From that moment on, Jim Hunter was gone. Catfish Hunter was born. By 1974, Catfish was the undisputed king of the hill. He had just finished a season equivalent to a modern analyst's Disneyland. He went 25-12. He had a 2.49 ERA. He threw 896 innings over the course of 3 years leading up to that point. He was the 1974 American League Cy Young winner, and he had 3 straight World Series rings with an Oakland A's dynasty that was as talented as it was dysfunctional. He was the adult in the room for a team that spent half of its time fighting each other in the dugout. He was the anchor. And in the winter of '74, that anchor was about to be cut loose. The relationship between a player and an owner is usually a simple exchange, talent for currency. But Charlie Finley wasn't a simple owner. He was a man who wanted to control all the variables. He wanted to pick the lineups. He wanted to design the uniforms, which explains the yellow and green mashup they started with. And he certainly wanted to control the purse strings. In February of 1974, Catfish Hunter signed a 2-year deal worth $100,000 per season. Today, that's not even league minimum, but back then, it was top-tier pay. However, Catfish and his lawyer, J. Carlton Cherry, were thinking about the future. They requested a specific provision. Half of that $100,000 salary, $50,000, was not to be paid to Jim directly, but instead it was to be paid into a life insurance annuity for his children. It was a smart conservative move. It was meant to defer income and provide a safety net for a man who knew his arm wouldn't last forever. The contract was clear. The legalese stated the money was to be paid to any person, firm, or corporation designated by the player. Finley signed it. But as the season went on, Finley started looking at the accounting. He realized that if he paid the $50,000 into the annuity, the IRS wouldn't allow the Oakland A's to deduct it as a current business expense. Because the money was going into a fund that Hunter wouldn't access for years, Finley would have to wait years to get his tax break. To Charlie Finley, $25,000 in immediate tax savings was worth more than the happiness of his Cy Young winner. He decided to simply not pay. Love him or hate him, there's absolutely a reason that unions exist. He ignored the letters from J. Carlton Cherry. He ignored the gentle nudges. He treated the contract like it was a suggestion rather than a legal obligation. By the time the A's were celebrating their 3rd straight World Series title in October, the tension was pretty much at a breaking point. Finley tried to finesse Hunter at the last minute and essentially passed the tax liability to Hunter. He called Catfish into his office before Game 3 of the ALCS and tried to hand him a check for the $50,000 directly. He thought, what player wouldn't want $50,000 in their hand right now? And I can't argue with the logic. 99 out of 100 players take that check. But Hunter was that 1%er. He wasn't a gambler. He was a man of principle. He refused the check. He told Finley, pay the insurance like the contract reads. Finley refused. He walked away from the conversation thinking he had won by keeping the cash in his pocket. What he actually did was hand the Major League Baseball Players Association what is effectively known today as a layup. This is where the story shifts from the dugout to the boardroom. Marvin Miller, the legendary head of the MLBPA, had been waiting for a moment like this. For decades, players were bound by the reserve clause, a system that effectively meant once you signed with a team, they owned you for life. You could only move if you were traded or released. Miller knew that challenging the reserve clause directly was a monumental task, but a breach of contract, that was a surgical strike. On October 4th, 1974, Hunter's lawyer sent a telegram to Finley. It was a formal notice of default. Under the terms of the standard player contract, a team had 10 days to fix a salary violation. If they didn't, the contract could be terminated. The clock started ticking. Finley, in his characteristic hubris, reached out to the American League president and the commissioner. They told him he should probably just pay the annuity. Finley, still hell-bent on getting that tax deduction, tried to send the money directly to Hunter again. Hunter sent it back. Just like Miller thought it would, the 10 days passed. No annuity was purchased. On October 17th, the telegram went out again. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a declaration of independence. Hunter's camp informed the A's that the contract was dead. The case went to arbitration in November. The man holding the gavel was Peter Seitz. Seitz was a perceptive, no-nonsense arbitrator who had spent years listening to the complaints of both sides of various cases. In that hearing room in New York City, Charlie Finley tried to play the role of the confused owner, the old babe in the woods routine. He claimed he didn't understand the deferred payment structure. He claimed he was just trying to do right by the kid. Seitz didn't buy it. He saw the Finley tax for exactly what it was. He ruled that Charlie Finley had defaulted on a material portion of the player's contract. The remedy wasn't just a fine. It wasn't just a requirement to pay the money. The remedy was the termination of contract. At 28 years old, in the absolute prime of his life, the best pitcher in baseball was a free agent. He belonged to nobody. He was a legal heist waiting to happen. The news hit the baseball world like a lightning bolt. Suddenly, 22 of the 24 major league teams realized that they had a chance to sign a Hall of Famer without giving up a single prospect or a single dollar in trade value. All it took was a checkbook and a convincing pitch. Catfish Hunter went home to Hertford to let the dust settle. But the dust didn't settle. It turned into a hurricane. Scouts, general managers, and owners descended on that small North Carolina town like it was the site of a new gold discovery. They stayed in local motels, they ate at the local diners, and they lined up on the porch of J. Carlton Cherry's law office. The Kansas City Royals offered a literal life insurance company as a part of the deal. The San Diego Padres offered a blank check. The Cleveland Indians offered a package that included a 1,000-acre farm. The Red Sox were in the mix. The Dodgers were lurking. But while the rest of the league was throwing numbers around, the Yankees were playing a different game. George Steinbrenner was in the second year of his ownership. He was already under fire from the fans and the media. He had been suspended from baseball at the time due to suspected illegal political donations, meaning he couldn't technically be the one making the pitch. But George Steinbrenner didn't do technicalities, especially when it came to winning. He sent Gabe Paul, his general manager, and Clyde Klutz, the same scout who had signed Catfish to the A's years earlier. Klutz was a secret weapon. He wasn't just a scout. He was a friend of the family. His fishing buddy. He knew Jim's mother. He knew the farm. And he knew that Jim didn't want a glamorous life. He wanted a secure one. While the other teams were promising fast cars and big city lights, Klutz and Paul were talking about the Pinstripe aura. They were talking about the history in the Bronx. They were talking about how a kid from a farm could become a king in the biggest city in the world. The Yankees' offer was a masterpiece of financial engineering. It wasn't just a salary. It was a safety net. A 5-year deal worth $3.75 million. A $1 million signing bonus, $100,000 per year in salary, half deferred. Life insurance annuities that would pay out for 15 years after he retired. College endowments for his children, Todd and Kim. Even a brand new Buick. It was the most lucrative contract in the history of sports. But more importantly, it was the contract that Charlie Finley was too cheap to honor. The Yankees didn't just meet the price. They validated that man. On December 31st, 1974, the announcement came. Jim "Catfish" Hunter was a New York Yankee. The reaction in the Bronx was electric. For the first time in a decade, the Yankees had the guy. They had the ace who could stabilize a young, talented, but directionless team. The impact was immediate. Catfish arrived in 1975 and did exactly what he was paid to do. He pitched 30 complete games. One more time. He pitched 30 complete games. In an era where we worry about 100 pitches, Catfish Hunter was an Iron Man. He went 23-14 with a 2.58 ERA. But his real value wasn't in the box score. It was in the clubhouse. Before Catfish, the Yankees were a group of individuals. After Catfish, they were a rotation. He taught young pitchers like Ron Guidry how to handle the pressure. He taught the hitters that if they gave him 2 runs, the game was over. He brought a championship DNA that had been missing since the days of Whitey Ford. He was the bridge. He led them to the World Series in 1976. And even though they lost to the Big Red Machine, the foundation was laid. In 1977 and 1978, with the addition of Reggie Jackson, the Yankees finally reached the mountaintop again. Catfish wasn't the same pitcher by 77. His arm was tired. The pellets in his foot and the diabetes he would later battle were starting to take their toll. But in the biggest moments, he was still the chairman. He was the one who stood on the mound in the postseason and made the opposition feel like they were swinging at ghosts. He retired in 1979 at the age of 33. He didn't hang around for the twilight years. He went back to the farm in Hertford. He went back to the fishing and the family he had protected with that $50,000 annuity. The legal heist of 1974 wasn't just a win for the Yankees. It was the birth of the modern era. It proved that in the Bronx, the technicality isn't a flaw in the system. It's an opportunity. It proved that if you want to build a dynasty, you don't just look for the best arm. You look for the man who knows the value of his own worth. Catfish Hunter didn't just sign a contract on that New Year's Eve. He signed a declaration that the Yankees were back. And for the fans sitting in Section 203, or listening to the echoes of the past, they knew that the house that Ruth built had a new tenant. When we look at the Yankees today, when we see the $300 million contracts and the global brand, we have to remember that it didn't start with a lucky break. It started with a legal heist. It started with an owner who was willing to spend when everybody else was afraid, and a pitcher who was willing to stand his ground on a matter of principle. See, Charlie Finley saved $25,000, but lost a Hall of Famer. George Steinbrenner spent $3 million and bought a decade of relevance. And we all know who needs to hear this right now, but that, my friends, is the Yankee way. Thanks for visiting the gallery today. If this deep dive into the business of the Bronx earned your time, by all means, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button, because there's more. Definitely share with a Yankee or a baseball fan. I'm Pinstripe Picasso, and until the next exhibit, 28.